things content and creative marketing. Before we begin, I just want to go through some housekeeping items for anyone who's joining us for the first time. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here. And if you joined us before, I'm sure you'll recognize the spiel I'm going to walk through, but just want to familiarize everyone with the Cisco WebEx platform. We definitely recommend that you download our Google Chrome extension. It only takes a few minutes to download, and it will provide the best video and audio quality. We want to encourage everyone to engage with today's speakers by submitting questions using the Q&A function on the right-hand panel throughout today's live cast. If it doesn't automatically appear, you can open it by clicking on the button with 3 small dots on the bottom of your screen. It's not too late to invite a colleague to join you for today's BI Livecast. So if you know someone who may be interested, feel free to forward them the same URL that you used. We're also streaming live on YouTube, so you can check out our Brand Innovators channel to watch live or view past sessions. For the best WebEx experience, we recommend closing out any other browsers on your computer for the best possible connection. And lastly, we suggest viewing our live cast using the grid view so that you can see all the speakers at once. You can find this option in the top right corner of your screen. Also, be sure to engage with us on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag BILivecast. We want to say a huge thank you to our partners at Cisco WebEx for being the official technology partner of Brand Innovators Virtual Summits and facilitating a great virtual event experience. And with that, I think we're ready to kick things off. So for today's first session of the day, we are thrilled to be joined by Scott Weisenthal, the Vice President of Global Creative and Content Marketing for Marriott International. And the moderator for his session is Gary Balabio, the Head of Technology Partnerships for Cloudinary. Welcome to the stage, Scott and Gary.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, so glad to have you both. I'll pass the mic over and check back in a little bit. Enjoy.
Sounds good. Thanks, Emily, for the introduction. So Gary Balabio here from Cloudinary, and just to kick things off, for this session, if you're at all interested in content marketing, content operations, this is really going to be the session for you. Scott has an incredible background that we'll be able to get into, related to these topics. And just to reiterate, set of topics that we're going to go through as part of the discussion. We'll have time for questions from the audience at the end, so definitely feel free to submit those, and we'll get to as many as we can. So, just to start off with introductions. So at Cloudinary, I run our technology partnerships. And for those of you who are not familiar with Cloudinary, we're a leading end-to-end media platform, and we provide tools to help end users create and organize and then optimize visual experiences on the web. We have tools for over 700,000 developers and marketers and brand owners who generate rich and engaging and unique media experiences with us at scale. And some of our customers, we have thousands of customers, but some to highlight are StubHub, Last Minute, Under Armour, Sony, Nintendo, and many others. So that's me, that's Cloudinary. And Scott, would you mind just going through a brief introduction on yourself and experience?
I would absolutely love to. First of all, I know you probably can tell I'm talking from a car, and that is because my kids were way too loud inside the house. So this was not something that I was expecting to do. And I'm looking at like the percentage of power I have. So if the power gets low on my computer and I start running backyard, it's going to be quite a back and forth. But we'll get there when we have to get there. But I am so excited to be here and to be talking about content marketing with you. I work for Marriott. I've been there for a few years now, overseeing creative and content marketing. Prior to that, I was at NBC Universal for 13 years, heading the creative at the Content Innovation Agency there. And before that, I was at a few different advertising agencies. So I've seen the agency side, the media side, and the brand side, and all have been fantastic.
Great. Well, no problem in doing it from the car. It's just a sign of the times nowadays.
That's right.
Great. So we definitely want to get into a little bit more and dive in your background. We'll start with NBC Universal. So it would be great to hear a little bit more about what you were working on there. Can you just start
Yeah,
going
absolutely.
through?
So the Content Innovation Agency was tasked with doing three things, all of them connected. One of them was to create big integrated cross-portfolio campaigns for our advertising partners to generate revenue, and that was leveraging the IP across digital and social and on air. We worked with companies like Amazon and Subaru and Sony Pictures. The second task that we had was to create the strategy for NBC Universal as a whole, as well as produce the upfront at Radio City Music Hall year over year. And then the third task we had, which was as a B2B play, which is we created something called The Curve, which was an insights brand all about what was new, next, and noteworthy in consumer culture. That was not only our calling card to our advertising partners, but it also was the basis of our ideation when it came to those big programs. So if you think about it as kind of like this ecosystem, we would use The Curve as a calling card. We would then share our strategy during the upfront season to get advertisers to want to work with us. And then we would work with those advertisers on those big campaigns that leveraged insights from The Curve to make sure that they were culturally relevant in order to meet their business objectives. And so those were the three main things we did, but it was all interrelated. And, you know, like I said, it was fantastic being there. We worked with so many great clients throughout the years that I was there. And then afterwards, I met Karin Timpone, the Chief Marketing Officer at Marriott, and I jumped over to Marriott and moved from my family from New York to Maryland. And just segueing, I guess, into what I do at Marriott is, and what really excited me about this opportunity was that she was looking at Marriott not just as a hospitality company, but also as a media company, given the fact that we have 1.5 million TVs in rooms, another 500,000 in the pipeline. We have millions upon millions of digital users coming to Marriott.com or our Bonvoy app. We have 140 million plus Bonvoy members that we can also reach with content. And so there was so much exciting ways of looking at it as a media company from a distribution perspective that I thought this was a really great next step in my career. And so my job entails overseeing four capabilities. One of them is our content studio that creates upper funnel storytelling. One of them is Marriott Bonvoy Traveler. That's our editorial storytelling business. Another one is MLive, which is all about real-time social media marketing. And then last, but definitely not least, is our in-house agency and design group. And again, they all work together to meet our business objectives. And, you know, we've been building different capabilities within these groups that make us look more like a media company at the end of the day.
Yep. It's very interesting to be thinking about Marriott as a media company, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Let's just related to the NBC Universal experience. Really interesting. I'd like to dig a little bit more on what you mentioned, the third one that you mentioned, The Curve, and also how that relates back to the first two. So that was a way to predict cultural trends, I guess, and figuring out how you can incorporate those into your content, right? Can you just describe, and maybe go in a little bit more detail on how that worked, how you were able to integrate some of those themes, and what successes did you see from it? I mean, can you provide a little bit more detail on that?
Sure. So, well, we had a consumer insights team that was part of the Content Innovation Agency. And what they would do is they had qualitative and quantitative research that they would do to see what was the latest and greatest happening in culture. And they would certainly look at different areas as it related to some of our networks. So when you thought about, you know, the now defunct Esquire network, but that was, you know, really targeted towards men. So we would look at what insights could we have around that audience that we could then leverage to get advertisers, not only to be culturally relevant for advertisers, but then to make the connection ultimately to Esquire Network for that advertiser in order to generate revenue. And so we would piece to this that certainly laddered back to Telemundo and at the time Mundos. We had the American Man, American Woman, the American Teenager. All of these things that are really important to our advertisers, that also align with our audience segments, and were just really unique and innovative types of trends that were happening, that we knew that when we combine that with our IP, we could meet the business objectives, whether they were engagement metrics, brand preference, in the case of Marriott, like portfolio affiliation. And we saw tremendous success, when we would work with, for example, with Amazon, and I can't get into the specifics of the metrics, but we would work on these symphony campaigns with them each holiday season. And every year that we did that, they always posted that they had the best holiday season from a revenue standpoint, growing year over year. And so, that's really exciting when you see what you're doing actually has an effect on the business's bottom line, which is what we always strive for.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if that has actually continued since you departed NBC Universal and went on to Marriott?
So, well, here's what I'll tell you. They have some incredibly smart people creating incredible content at NBC Universal. And so they have continued to grow that business and make amazing programs. The team there is very, very talented.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting too, the way you can take those consumer trends, those cultural trends, and try to integrate them into the content that you're developing. Pretty interesting, especially from a content innovation standpoint. Awesome. So let's fast forward a little bit to some of your more recent experiences. We'll jump ahead to Marriott. And one of your experiences that we discussed in the past there was just related to the Bonvoy campaign. And I know that was a huge campaign, reaching millions of people around the world. So actually, why don't we first just maybe give a little bit of a description of the background of what Bonvoy is, and maybe not everybody in the audience is familiar with that.
Sure.
The Starwood acquisition and everything else. Yeah.
Sure. So Marriott acquired Starwood a few years ago. They also had Ritz-Carlton. So they had 3 different rewards programs: Ritz-Carlton Rewards, SPG, which was from Starwood, and then Marriott Rewards. And it made a lot of sense to combine those programs in order to allow all of our members from those different programs to be able to partake in the entire portfolio and all of the benefits of each of those programs. And so we brought them all together to create one program called Marriott Bonvoy. Bonvoy is short for Bon Voyage, which is all about wishing you good travel. And so we knew that this was a big change for a lot of our members, and certainly something that we want to share with the entire world, who are a global company. And so we created a campaign working very, very closely with our global offices to shout Bonvoy. First to really accomplish was name recognition and an understanding of this new travel program. And we call it a travel program because and a lot of loyalty programs are very transactional. We will connect on an emotional level, and many loyalty currently will be considered a travel program, not just a loyalty program. And so, ultimately, we went around the world and we did a very, very big global campaign with many, many partners, one of them being Observatory. And it was a huge success, and probably one of the campaigns I'm most proudest of in my career.
Mm-hmm. Definitely an amazing campaign and an amazing transition. When I think about two huge companies like that coming together, I'd like to drill into this a little bit more. So just from the sheer fact, I mean, you have thousands of employees, and you have many different systems, that need to come together in order to ensure a successful launch like this. Can we just, dig in a little bit more, just in terms of from a system standpoint, and even from from a tool standpoint? I'm assuming, as part of the acquisition, post-acquisition, you had to make sure that the systems, came together, even before, maybe even before you launched the program. I'm curious about how long after you have to bring the systems together and make sure everybody's operating on the same platforms before you can start to pull the team together and start marching down this track of a huge campaign like Bonvoy.
Yes. So I will be the first one to say I am not the systems guy. I am the marketer and the storyteller. But everything had to come together. It was a huge lift for IT, a huge lift for digital, for us to bring everything together. And there was a big plan put into place, led by our president, Stephanie Lenartz, of Consumer Operations. And look, it was long hours, and it forced collaboration. And I will tell you that Marriott is really incredible when it comes to collaboration. It's collaboration is a huge part of the culture. Just to throw this out, the Marriotts, who are still very involved and run the business, have always said, if you treat your associate well, they'll treat their guest well. And that is, when you think about that, and that also helps inspire collaboration. It was a huge collaborative effort. And of course, there were lots of bumps in the road, but we all worked together. And ultimately, they were combined. And then once they were combined, and we were sure that the experience was one we wanted to share with the world, we then launched the campaign. And it's definitely a work in progress. We keep on enhancing our loyalty program, travel program, giving it lots of meaning, making sure that we have the best offers and benefits possible for our members, and making sure that we always put them first.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And that's definitely true. I mean, even in our case, making sure we have happy employees, it just means that you have happy customers. So definitely parallel there from a tech company standpoint. So from a high level too, just scaling out such an operation, when I think about, again, the thousands of people, that are involved from both a Marriott and a Starwood standpoint, all the different brands that are coming together as well. I'm thinking about what kind of approval process that needs to be in place for the high level message, and then also for the downstream, areas, the different geographies that are involved that also need to tell that message to different audiences. Can you just talk a little bit about, from a content operations standpoint,
Sure.
how like that approval process is done, how it's organized, etc.
Well, there are a lot of people that are a part of the process. And so certainly, and I always say that the key to success for any type of campaign is project management. And project management has to understand how many approvers there are, has to work that into the workback schedule in order to ultimately make sure that we are successful, that we stay on time, that we stay on budget. And to your point, there weren't just the approvers like our chief marketing officer, our chief brand officer, our president, our CEO, but there were also approvers that were in a continent. So number one, we have to start very early, and which we do. But also what we have to do is we have to make sure that we, trust and empower our associates globally, with the big idea, to then run with the big idea. So for example, with the Bonvoy campaign, we had a strategy which was to surround culturally relevant events in each one on each one of the continents. So in North America, it was the Oscars. There was the Dubai Jazz Fest. there was the Hong Kong Sevens, there was Manchester United and the Liverpool match. There were a whole bunch of different big events that we then wrapped with our Bonvoy marketing campaign. And we really leaned heavily on our to tell us what made the most sense, but to reach our business objectives, but then allowed them to then run with those. And if you think about it from a racy standpoint, they're responsible, where ultimately, a few of us at headquarters were accountable for those situations. And so a racy is a really great thing to use, of who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and of course who's informed. And so we like to leverage our racies a lot, because organization and project management is always key, but there are a lot of approvals, and as long as we are sound strategically, I have always had success in being able to get through those approval processes, yes, with changes and with tweaks, but not having to start again from scratch.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you needed to have in place different, from a structural standpoint, different layers, and where it's clear where the decisions lie, in terms of there's a high level message that comes down, and then that gets relayed, downstream to different leaders, I guess, in different geographies, so they can control the message or combine it with other events that are happening, like you mentioned, in the different geographies.
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess as adjustments are made to the message, it's the same process that happens, and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Now, what about in terms of, so we talked, you mentioned a little bit about the events, and then I view that as kind of customizing the message, downstream to different audiences. What about in terms of personalization? How is that incorporated into any of this work, and how is it leveraged, utilized, measured, if at all? Yeah.
So everything we do is audience led, and certainly we know a lot about our members. We have about 140 million plus. Everything when it comes to our members is as per GDPR guidelines, of course. And so we are able to serve up different messages to different audiences with messages or experience that we know will resonate with them. And so, we will do that, lower, mid, upper funnel. Certainly we can get more personalized when it comes to, email marketing and things we do across social and digital. I think that we always are looking for what's next in personalization at scale. And there are a few things that I've seen from some technology partners, but I think that we still have a ways to go to be able to get there and do it in a way that makes sense to both our audiences as well as to our business. And so I am, definitely open to hearing about what's new in the personalization space that we can then leverage in order to tell better stories that are going to be more effective to our audiences.
Got it. So definitely, sounds like it's definitely an area of further investments, possibly in an area that you see results from a conversion standpoint, I'm assuming?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. I'd like to transition a little bit and talk about, you had mentioned I think it was 1.5 million TVs in Marriott's around the world.
Yes.
It's quite an asset to have, basically. I'm curious to talk a little bit more about content that's displayed on there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that I guess that goes into in terms of deciding what type of content you want to just use on those on that medium. Also, the development, there must be some real operations behind it in terms of the development of that content.
Sure.
Can you just go into a little bit more about what is produced there, what is shown there, how it's leveraged today, and
Absolutely.
some of the successes you've seen with it? Go ahead.
So we have Bonvoy TV, all of our rooms. To be perfectly honest, it is in its nascent stage because there's so much more that we can do with it. What I would tell you is that that's overseen by our content studio, the programming of our in-room channel. To your point, 1.5 million TVs in rooms. We have about another 500,000 in the pipeline. It's something that I definitely see as we continue to progress, not only a marketing moat in an era of fragmentation to be able to tell our stories, but certainly could be a place of monetization for the company in the future. So as far as what we actually put on the channel, the content strategy, the lens we put on it is that Marriott Bonvoy TV is about inspiring, purposeful content by travelers for travelers, showcasing where we can take you. And that's been the crux of our strategy at a really 35,000 foot view, and the lens that we take with anything that we're going to put on the channel. Does it feel like it meets that criteria? Does it feel like it is a passion point of our members? Certainly, it gets complicated because we have certain rooms in the Asia Pacific region, and certain rooms in Europe, and in certain rooms in other parts of the world, where we have to be cognizant of what's on that channel so that it is culturally relevant. So when we push out our reels to the different hotels, they are slightly different. So we not only have to think about what we're programming on a channel, but how we alter that programming per continent. And again, that's close work with our continent partners. Our content studio isn't just creating content themselves. They are curating content and working with others, content creators around the world. And it has been really, really successful. A highlight of my job is when we get emails from our guests talking about the storytelling that we have on that channel and how it has inspired them to explore the world with us.
Got it. Makes sense. And it makes me think about M Live a little bit. So I'd like to transition to talk about M Live for a second. And I'm curious, first of all, it might be good to help for those in the audience who are not familiar with M Live. Can you just briefly describe what that is?
So M Live is our real-time social media command center. We have one on each continent. If you were to come to our headquarters in Bethesda, it would look like it's a room that's the walls are glass, and inside it looks like a control room for a news center. And essentially what they are doing is three things. One, they are looking across social and mining it for trends and insights that we can then use to enhance our marketing or what we do on property. The second thing is they certainly are doing social listening and reputation management. So if we hear something from a guest, we're able to call the hotel to make sure that everything is taken care of. And then the third thing that M Live has been known for, that is probably its most well known for, is its ability to surprise and delight the guests through social marketing. So best way to explain it is that if you are at one of our Ritz-Carlton resorts and you post on Instagram a picture of you just getting engaged, we will be able to see that in real time at one of our M Live centers, and then we can then pick up the phone, call the hotel, and have them bring you up a bottle of champagne. And we never ask anyone to post on our behalf. I would say, over 90% of the time they do. We've seen this turn guests into brand advocates, and all of this is done for zero paid media spent. So it has been really, really powerful for us. They work very closely with the content studio, with Traveler, with the agency, in everything that we do, and with the brands and everything that we do.
I love that. I'm going to try it out next time I'm on a getaway with the wife and see what happens. What about in terms of, so there's a lot of content that obviously can get generated from end users like that, but is there any way that you can look at, maybe with their approval, but incorporating that into some campaigns that you run? I mean, it's an amazing program.
Yeah, so
yeah.
a lot of there are a lot of surprise and delights that we do that are actually planned. So like we have a partnership with the NFL, a partnership with Manchester United, and so we'll plan to do surprise and delights around some of the big events with our partners, and we will certainly be able capture that through video content, and then use that storytelling as part of campaigns that we have pushed out there. Absolutely, we want to be able to showcase the Hello?
All right. And I get, can you hear me okay now,
I can hear
Scott?
you. All of a sudden, your
Okay.
screens disappeared, but they came back.
Okay, good. Glad we're back. Now, can you just briefly touch on some emerging technologies or other technologies that you're looking at possibly incorporating into other campaigns in the future? I guess VR may be one component, maybe AR. Can you maybe briefly just go into that? Some thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you and I, we talked a little bit about VR and AR in the past, and I'm a big fan of VR and AR. I don't know if we've solved doing VR at scale, and certainly with our company being a global company, we're looking at how we can leverage things at scale. But I could be wrong. So if somebody on the call knows how to leverage VR at scale in a great way, please feel free to reach out. I would love to have that conversation. But what I will always say is that we started a place we started the strategy. So it's always about what's our strategy. I usually always ask 4 questions, which is after we come up with the strategy is what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What does success look like and how are we going to measure that success? And those are 4 questions I always ask of the team. But even before that, it starts with strategy. And if AR or VR makes sense with the strategy, then absolutely, we will welcome it if it makes sense. I would never start off at a place of, hey, let's just do something with VR, because then we get into a place of could be looked at as content for content's sake. And we cannot forget we have business objectives that we need to achieve, and everything has to be aligned with those business objectives.
Okay, makes sense. In terms of the, I guess, some of the key metrics, you mentioned the business objectives and everything. Can you just maybe touch a little bit on the some of the key metrics that you focus on and measure as you're rolling out the campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, it really all depends on what we're trying to do. Certainly, we want to get new enrollments of members. We have a business all around co-brand credit cards, so we want to increase our credit card base. Certainly, we want to put heads in beds. And then of course we want to make sure that there's brand preference. And so, there's a lot of different metrics, and it all depends on what we're going to do. Like I mentioned earlier, in the case of the Bonvoy launch, that was all about name recognition, but other instances is about portfolio affiliation. So, there's many different business objectives depending upon what we're doing, and there are different groups. That one group might be focused on one business objective, and another group will be focused on a different business objective. But certainly when it comes to membership, heads in beds, and credit card acquisitions, and even downloading the Bonvoy app, those are really big focuses of ours.
Got it. So I'll start to look at some of the questions coming in from the audience here.
Sure.
The first one, Scott, that came in was, you had mentioned earlier when you were talking about your Marriott experience that the Bonvoy campaign was one that you're the most proud of in your career. And there's some individuals asking why. And can you just maybe provide a little bit more details of why is it a highlight for you in your career?
So I also want to say it's one of them. So I don't want to.
One of them, yeah.
I don't want to. There are many other darlings. So
yeah.
But I think that this was an opportunity to introduce a new brand, and you don't always have the opportunity to do that. And so it was, and it was an opportunity to introduce a new brand on a global level. And so there was that made it really, really exciting. And I also think that what makes things exciting are is the collaboration that you have with others. And when you work with top-notch people, like I have been working with on this campaign, it just makes it so much more enriching.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Another question that came in is related to how are you determining where to spend time on emerging technologies? And I guess related to that too, there's another question around, are there certain types of technologies that you see are driving the highest conversions?
Yeah, so let me see. So
one is
yeah,
today and one is the future. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think that, we are always looking at, new technologies and new innovations that we can bring into the fold with our marketing campaigns. I would say that I probably have 3 to 4 meetings each week with, companies that are coming up with new things. And it's great to have all of that knowledge and to build those relationships. And we have to all the time, because you never know when you're going to have a strategy that then is going to want to leverage one of those, innovative, one of those innovations, one of those technologies. And so that's kind of the way that I think about when I think about how I want to work with technology companies. Again, I go back to it. It's about the strategy and then what makes sense for the strategy. So I'm going to take it upon myself to put myself out there, to be learning as much as I can, to be building relationships with these companies. And that's what we've been doing. So there's something that we're working on with MLive right now, which is a technology that ultimately will help us leverage our 700,000 associates. It's optional, of course, but to leverage them and their social media base to be able to share certain messages around Marriott and what we're doing and what we can offer. And it's something really exciting that we're doing a proof of concept on right now. And if all goes well, we'll roll that out globally. So what did I not answer? Because I may have gone off on a tangent.
So you definitely answered the future one, and that sounds like an amazing use of social and of your associates as well. The one question I'm not sure if you answered, but just related to the conversions and which technologies are driving the highest conversions.
No, I don't think that there is one technology that that leads more to conversions than anything else. And again, it all depends upon what do we consider a conversion. Is a conversion getting somebody to book a room? Is it to enroll in our travel program, Marriott Bonvoy? Is it to sign up for the credit card? Is it to download an app? Like, there are all these different types of conversions, and they all come from different places. I mean, I'm a big supporter, a big advocate of fewer, bigger, better when it comes to doing marketing campaigns and not doing little one-offs or random acts of marketing, as we call them. And certainly when we all work together across creative and content, across partnerships, across loyalty, across brand, and then we are, of course, working with our media agency, Publicis, and one of our creative agencies. It ultimately is about all of the parts working together for those conversions. And so I wish I had an answer to what is that one technology, but I really don't. And it often changes depending upon, our message.
Makes complete sense. Now, another question that came in is related to, so when it comes to communicating to your consumers, how do you think about brand purpose, and how does that impact your approach to your marketing and the content you're creating?
Yeah. So let's all keep in mind that we have 30 different hotel brands. And then, of course, we have Marriott Bonvoy. So we have lots of different brands that we are working across, each with its own unique identity. And that's really, really important, because, the experience you may want to have at Ritz will be different than an experience that you may have at a Spring Hill Suites. And so, ultimately, we think about having purpose, and we think about our audience first, and we think about what is it that they want, what is purposeful to them, and then how can we make sure that we give them that experience, not just through marketing, but through their entire consumer journey, when they're pre-stay, stay, post-stay. Our belief is that we say to ourselves, what we want to do is to enrich people's lives every step of the travel journey. And so that's how we think about things when we want to ultimately go to market, and connect and engage with our audiences.
Got it. Okay. Another one that came in is, how much emphasis is placed on personalization of the message versus generic messaging? And are there any examples that you can share?
Yeah, that we always want to be as personalized as possible with our messaging. We found, like I mentioned with M Live, that to do those that are more about interacting with them across social and then bringing that experience into their real world at property. We've seen those types of personalized experience, be very, very successful for us. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to personalization at scale, we are looking at our audiences. We are looking at what we can share with those audiences that will engage them, to take them from inspiration to conversion. But if we're talking about personalization as being able to personalize for each individual person and hyper target, like I said, we can do that with email marketing and certain things for social and digital. But I still think that that's something that we still need to achieve. And I think as new technologies come out, there will be more an opportunity to be even more personalized in the future.
Okay. And one more, this is probably more related to the current situation that we're in, with a lot of people working from home, is how do you make sure that your team members feel engaged and are inspired as they're working remotely nowadays, for the most part, I guess, around the world? Yeah.
So it is obviously a very different world. Usually I would not be having this conversation from my car. But look, at the end of the day, I've always said my leadership style is one of empowering, supporting, and inspiring. And those are the three tenets that I think right now, probably the supportive part of those three is probably at the forefront of everything that I do. So I think it ultimately comes down to showing everyone that you care, being very transparent with everything that's going on. And I've always had an open door policy, and now I have an open Teams or an open Zoom policy. And I feel like when your associates feel like you care about them and what they're doing, they will stay engaged.
Right. So one more question. I see Emily's on, maybe about to give us the hook.
I see that.
Yes. One last question. So I guess this goes to like the audience and the other brand innovators that are in the audience, and especially those who are starting out, on their journey. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe some advice to them, or things that they should be thinking about if they're interested in content marketing, or if they're interested in advertising? What would you say to them? Yeah.
So I'd say two quick things. One is data, and we didn't really talk so much about data, but data is so important to get the right data, to build the right strategy, to then take that to tell the right story. And I can't, emphasize enough how much those insights and that data is. And then, of course, on the back end, the analytics to either see how you've succeeded or to see what you will learn from. So I would say that's really important, and we always need to do that first and foremost. The other thing that I would say is, when you look at advertising and content marketing are two different beasts. and even in the way that you spend the money around the two. And in my opinion and in my experience, when it comes to advertising, you're spending about 10 to 15% of your budget on the creation and then everything else on the distribution. When you get into content marketing, you're not only talking about the creation of the content and the distribution, but also the promotion. And those financials work very differently than the normal advertising a financial model. And you need to take that into account and make sure that those above you understand how it should work in order to be successful.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for
Thank
answering
you.
all the questions. Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you guys so much for joining us, and appreciate Scott still tuning in from your car. I understand having loud background noises, so we're so grateful to have both of you here and hope to have you again soon.
All right. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Well, a big thanks to Scott and Gary for kicking us off today. And a reminder to our audience that we still have 2 more great sessions ahead of us. So be sure to share today's link with friends and colleagues so they can join in. Next up, we're going to hear from Leslie Taylor. Leslie is currently the Global Director of Marketing for Gensler, the world's largest design firm, where she leads a multidisciplinary team of strategists, editors, and designers who own the firm's brand and external communications channel. With over 18 years of experience in sales, marketing, brand, and corporate communications, she's found the pace of change in the way brands connect with audience the most rewarding challenge. And today's session will be moderated by Jamie Eldon, the Chief Revenue Officer of Shutterstock. Welcome to the stage, Leslie and Jamie.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome. So welcome everybody today to today's Fireside Virtual Chat at Brand Innovators. Today I'm joined by Leslie Taylor, as aforementioned, who's the Global Director of Marketing for Gensler, a company that partners and delivers architecture, design, and planning to today's leading companies globally. Firstly, unique times we find ourselves in, and regardless of the business type, when it comes to marketing and advertising solutions and looking for unique ways to reach and engage with clients, companies like yourself, I'm sure, have gone through major transformations during this period and new strategies on how to communicate with clients moving forward. And today, hopefully, we're going to go through quite a few of those initiatives with Leslie, and she can give us her insights on how she's operating a marketing division globally during this. So let's begin. Firstly, I'm very pleased, Leslie, to be speaking with you. Huge fan of the company and what you guys are doing in your transformation with design and architecture globally. Big fan. So firstly, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your role for Gensler for those watching who might not be familiar.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jamie. I'm really pleased to be here with you. If our warm-up yesterday isn't any indication, someone's going to have to shut us up at the end of this. But I have the pleasure of leading marketing for Gensler. And what that really looks like is, as mentioned, I really operate at where the brand meets our clients, as well as our people. And so we really look at communications quite holistically. And I would say with our client base being completely global, I actually think, and maybe this is shifting gears into high speed around the conversation around the pace of change right now. I was actually reflecting this morning that if COVID has done anything for us as a marketing community, it's actually likely made us more global than we ever have been. I think what I mean by that is, for us, we have 50 offices around the globe. And now we say we actually have 6,000 offices around the globe because all of our people went home. And what that did was it completely blurred boundaries for us. Now where I may have been based in San Francisco and have physically seen my colleagues in the Bay Area, now I'm actually seeing people around the world more often than I ever have, because it's now where we're orienting. It's just the norm now to be on a 7 a.m. call with my friends in London and those who have from Asia who are rock stars because they generally stay up very late for us here in the US. And so it is actually a really interesting time for communications at large.
Yes, no, it truly is. We see that here on our side as well, being a global office. I find myself often late night calls to Asia, early morning calls to EMEA. So with you there. So another question that I just want to ask you is, with this evolution of your organization and resources since going kind of remote, what are you doing now in-house for marketing and strategy versus pre-pandemic? And who are you leveraging to help you get there? Is it
Yeah.
external agencies, or is it a new type of partnerships that you've partnered with to help you get through this?
Yeah, it's such a good question. For us in particular, no, it's interesting. We are a large design firm. And, as I mentioned, we have, a number of offices and 6,000 people. Our marketing teams do operate a bit more like a startup. We're a bit of a lean, mean team. And that's both where I sit in the central organization, as well as our teams that are locally on the ground within our offices. I would say what has changed, during 2020 and all of the global challenges that we faced in 2020. What has changed hasn't really been that we've outsourced anything. I would say we have rapidly evolved and responded as these lean, mean teams to what we believe is how we need to better communicate with our clients. And so, an example of that is we've always done content marketing. We've always done heavily relied on leading with thought leadership because for us as a professional services firm, leading with thought leadership to show our expertise, our subject matter expertise to our clients is really how we connect with the clients, and that leads to that journey that we take with them. Now it has to be much faster, much more responsive. What happened, what we spoke about last week may actually be irrelevant this week, or it may have completely changed. And so I would say our team's response to that is just moving faster. We suddenly are doing email marketing in a far different way. What it means across our organization internally is that it's actually, I think, one of the coolest parts of what we do is we're now collaborating with our technology teams in a far more collaborative way than we ever have, because we need them on the data side, we need them on the tool side. So I would honestly say our team's growth, both as a team and individually, has been tremendous in the past 6 months.
Have you been leveraging during this time any new forms of technology that are bringing communications, CRM, CSMs together?
Yeah, I think many share a similar story, that we had been trudging along with various technologies up until this point, potentially even dealing with change management issues. And this time has been a catalyst for those technologies. So we had a lot of systems in place already. And I would say now we are actually optimizing them. And that's been probably one of the greatest gifts of this time, is now truly using those systems that you described, CRM, marketing automation. It's catalyzed what we're doing with those. It's made us so much smarter than we were before.
So how are you thinking about your customer now? Now as in like the new normal, as you're saying. Has that changed?
I think it's been enriched. Gensler has 10 guiding principles that we truly operate by. And one of our core guiding principles is that it all begins and ends with our clients. And so if anything, every move that we've made throughout this process has been keeping our clients at the center. And if you think about that, I'll just using ourselves as an example, as an architecture firm, when everybody went to work from home, our clients, rightfully so, their first question was, how are we going to maintain business continuity on our projects? You're designing our projects. Are you guys able to work in the cloud? Are you able to, continue to deliver on our scope of work that we have with you, with people from home? And so we had to figure out how to communicate that and instill trust. And that's built on a foundation that we've had with our clients, always having them at the center. And so I think that also was our North Star as we were crafting our marketing strategies through this, of how we're going to communicate. So it wasn't about selling by any means. It was about continuing to instill trust that we are going to be able to help, our clients through this unprecedented time.
Has that had an effect on the type of media mix now that you're using within the company versus pre-pandemic? Have you changed the types of media and types of platforms used to communicate with clients and engage?
Yeah, I would say it's more about channel strategy. That's probably what's changed more than anything. We're pretty straightforward with what we use for a media mix. And we don't particularly do advertising or media buying or anything along that lines, and instead we depend highly on owned, earned, some paid media, but not truly a lot. And so for us, what we have seen is results from engagement on that content. So it's giving us the signals that we are in fact putting out content that is being highly consumed, actively engaged with. And it says to us that we're on the right track with what our clients need to hear from us, what our audience needs to hear from us.
Right. And on that messaging, I know us as a company during the pandemic, we've really become a partner to brands and agencies globally, helping them figure out what type of messaging and tone you should be using during this time so you're not mute to the situation.
That's right.
And you're not putting your brand in an environment that can be seen negatively. Have you what changes have you made, if any, to your narrative, your tone, and how you're presenting who you are today and how you can be a solution provider?
Well, I think one of the words that you just used was extremely important, can't be underscored enough, and that was partnership. And so I think that that authenticity of message, where you are serving a purpose to your clients as a partner, as a trusted advisor, has certainly been at the center of what we're doing. I think also we really believe that all ships rise in the industry as we're having these conversations. If you think about, and Jamie, you and I riffed on this a bunch yesterday. If you think about the implications of returning back to life, you can fill that in so many ways, like returning to the office, returning to movie theaters. We just saw that, there's a big movie launch today. How are people going to feel in the theaters? All of that has design implication. And you can look at that in so many levels. And so for us, being a leader in the design industry and having a voice around the power of design within that returning to life, that's important, that we're speaking on behalf of an industry and beginning a conversation where truly all ships rise, because in the end, this is about, not to get, too overly cheesy, but this is about us returning to a better world than we left when we went home.
Yes, we chatted about this yesterday, and I think it is an interesting topic because you service businesses globally, and with that, the return to work is such a big thing in all of our industries, and you're kind of at the epicenter of it because there are businesses global and locally who are like, okay, we can return to work, we can start to bring employees back gradually into offices, into retail. What does that look like now? And is that going to change again post-COVID, or are we building for a new future? And so, I know we're asking those questions ourselves as a company. And so, that must have opened up a whole new world of strategy and conversation and narrative for your company in that thought leadership space to come up and be like, hey, we hear this, and yes, it is going to be a change. And we talked yesterday about nobody wants to return to work in a hospital environment. I think that's how we calculated it. It's like in a screen with masks and gloves and sanitizers surrounding us. And all of that is like a vision that a lot of people have in their head of returning back to work.
Yeah.
But employers are now thinking, look, we have to think beyond that. We have to look at what is the new back to work schedule look like? What does space look like? Social distancing. And that really taps into design and architecture, again, for these companies. So how have you been trying to communicate that messaging and get that out as a thought leader and as a company that can partner and help you navigate this?
Yeah. Yeah. So, at the conversation is human experience.
Yeah.
And so we really have to, and it's, as a professional marketer, that's at the heart of our conversation as well, is meeting that, meeting the human on the other end of the message. It's as a firm, we have a very robust, we actually have a Gensler Research Institute. I have the pleasure of being a partner with that institute. And for a content marketer, what a gift that we actually have a group that's focused on true research, valuable research that actually is able to drive our communication strategy. So when we're talking about something, we're actually able to lean into statistically significant data that supports a point of view that can really drive the conversation. And so it's not anecdotal, it's not subjective, although we vet in as well. And so to think about what that means for us to try to lead this conversation, and again, think about it from All Ships Rising, thinking about it from how we improve the human experience overall. We're able to take really important data points. For example, understanding that people do want to return to the office. That in fact, based on our research, only 12% of people don't want to return to the office. However, they cannot return to the same office. It has to be an improved experience. It has to be a space that they trust. And so from a communications opportunity, it's how do we get out thought leadership that gives our clients enough information that they need. We also, of course, want to continue that conversation with them one-on-one. So to me, that becomes a really compelling opportunity for us to communicate. It really drives our purpose as a firm, because it is about, ensuring that this future world is one that's focused on wellness and well-being, on social equity, on climate change, all of these things that have really hit us over the head in this year.
They certainly have. And that leads me to another question. During these times, a lot of companies, and their marketing strategies are looking, okay, how do we market to our existing client base to inform them that, hey, we're still open, we're still working, we're still there, and we're still able to provide full 360 service to you. But has that changed how you are now looking for new clients? Because, every business you have your existing, and then there's always a new acquisition marketing strategies. Has how you look to market to a new client changed during this time?
Yeah, I don't, it's interesting to know that it necessarily has changed, although I would say what our opportunity has been is to position ourselves, for services that one may not have looked to us before. When again, using design as that example, I think that what we know is that companies all over the world are reinventing themselves right now because they have to. Just previously before us was Marriott, and the reinvention that they're going through right now is tremendous. For that, that's an opportunity for us all to think about not only are we reinventing ourselves, maybe it's not reinvention, maybe it's evolution, but our clients, our customers are likely going through that reinvention. So what does that give us an opportunity to position ourselves for with them? I think you shared stories with Shutterstock, and what you guys are doing right now in terms of like responding to that reinvention that your customers are going through. And so to me, that's that incredible opportunity that we as marketers are in the center of, is that new positioning.
Next question is, we're seeing in the marketplace ourselves, Shutterstock, obviously supplying creative and advertising strategies to clients globally. We've seen them change, pre-COVID, during COVID, it's been much more of a one-to-one connection, much more community, much more citizenship, messaging, which has really helped businesses communicate internally with employees and externally. and not start to promote things that are not necessarily going to be able to take action in the next week or the week before. So travel industries, hotel industries, leisure industries, it's hard for them to predict the future of when we can get back to full marketing strategy and go big. From your standpoint, are you looking to change your 2021 overall marketing initiatives based on this year? That, what if, God forsake, pandemic comes back again in another phase? Are you preparing your marketing in case of that? Or are you preparing just holistically and being able to pivot, if circumstances change again?
I think we're pivoting right now. It's almost like you can't wait to have the conversation for 2021. We're talking about right now. And I would say our plan for marketing has changed already, 3 times over in just a 6-month period. And that is because you have to be in tune or attuned with your audience to understand how they're receiving information. I mean, we talk about content fatigue, we talk, webinar fatigue, the fact that we're all going to have 3 eyes by the end of this Zoom journey that we're on, or the webinars. What does that mean on how we're delivering and connecting to our audience? I think what we should all be discovering is that how you cut through the noise is with good content. And how you get to good content is understanding. It's like the fundamentals. It's understanding your audience and crafting a message that will reach them in a way that will reach them. And so, it's like we're not trying to blow the roof off the marketing house, but instead get real focused on the basics and stay attuned to any data and insights that you can get from it, and really work to deliver good messages to your people, to your audience.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing a lot of clients and brands globally of ours have completely changed how they communicate and the types of format. We're seeing less 30-second traditional spots being made during this period of time. We're seeing less promotion and sell during this time. It's more of like communicating, hey, we see, hear you, we're there, and we're here to help and serve. It's much more of a softer sell, but what it's actually doing is making companies become more creative and more brand storytelling.
Right.
And so that's leading them into new areas of, telling stories about their brand and how they can help and how they can partner locally as well as globally. From a brand storytelling standpoint, do you see that that's something that's going to develop for you in the short, mid, and long term, telling larger stories from a thought leadership standpoint to the industry that you're in? Do you think the format of the creative is going to change somewhat for you moving forward?
Yeah, I think that we're certainly understanding that there are some muscles that we have not built or even leveraged as much as we have in the past. We're such a visual industry, right? We're in design, we're at the center of it, and I think that us really being able to tell stories in a more robust way, thinking about video, but not in the traditional sense. What does video look like? What does it feel like? I think that is an opportunity for us to storytell that way. And I think that going back to that channel strategy, that becomes really important for how do we get people to click and stay and watch. In terms of like even content marketing, how do you get them to read? It's so funny. You think that we've all moved on past listicles, and we haven't. Everybody loves a good listicle. So it's interesting. I think we'll continue to evolve what we're capable to do in that lean, mean, in-house team that I mentioned, but then also figure out where we can experiment a bit more.
We just go back to platform strategy again. You have your owned and operated. So you have your owned and operated platforms, and then there's external platforms that can use. Has there been a specific platform that you doubled down on during this time that you found engaging, that you thought, wow, this works. Let's double down here and, and see where it takes us? Has anything like that cropped up during this period?
Yeah, again, it's to our industry and to our client type. So again, if you're thinking about how we're professional services, we're a talent brand, we're selling design consultancy. I think what we do, first of all, we have, because of those owned channels, we've positioned ourselves with earned media in a way that has never been so successful before. We have a great agency of record that's helping us there, but that amplification has driven so much for us, so much opportunity for us. Interestingly, and this isn't, I wouldn't say we're the firm that's we're designing spaces for many of these companies, but we may not be on some of these platforms like a TikTok or others, but because that's not where our clients are. So it is interesting that something like LinkedIn, which is pretty that is straightforward as it gets, is a tremendous way for us to connect with our clients. But also understand that our clients are looking for a human connection to our firm as well. So they've got to see what Gensler's talking about, but then they want to know somebody who's saying it themselves. So that person driving out that message on LinkedIn is as important as the Gensler brand driving out that message as well. And then finally, I will say, as much as we do have content fatigue on webinars, that I would say when done well, and again, it's got to be great content delivered to a targeted, segmented audience, there's definitely a return on that for us.
How have you managed global marketing? I know we as a company and others, large global companies, at the beginning of the pandemic and right through to now, we've seen ups and downs in EMEA, in Asia Pacific, in LATAM, and then in Americas. There's ups and downs. Markets open, markets close. Markets opens, markets close.
Right.
And we've all gone through that journey of the roller coaster. For you, have you identified, has this opened up any areas where you thought, oh my, wow, we actually, EMEA is actually, a region that we can actually, increase our share of voice. We've found better ways to communicate. Because I agree to what you said earlier. If anything that has opened my eyes to the creative world is being on Zoom and Google Hangout every day. I am speaking to people in Milan and in Spain in the morning, where if I was in an office location in New York City, I might not have as much face time or as engagement with employees to discuss strategies in those markets. So has that opened up new opportunities on a global level for you that you probably were not able to see as a company when you were in office?
Yeah, I think so. I may answer this a different way than you even asked it. I think what's been tremendous for us with, again, the people are home, 6,000 offices now instead of 50. I think what's tremendous is us being able to have our finger on the pulse of what's going on in all of these markets. We always did, of course, but what's different about it now is that our strategy and our market positioning is so dependent on what's actually happening, to your point, in that local market. So is it open or is it closed? Are people quarantining in Abu Dhabi or are they not? What's happening in China? What's happening in Singapore? And so our connectivity with our people that are local, because we're local first and then global, is actually giving us an opportunity to say, oh, well, because that's happening in your market now, this is how we're going to be able to partner with you to give you the marketing tools that you need to reach your specific, Costa Rican clients or to reach your clients in Tokyo. And so I would say, so that partnership, that internal partnership with our, practitioners who are a do-it-seller model, has created more synergies than we've had before because we have to be in touch with them. Otherwise, then we're fully out of the game.
Yeah. Well, finally, I have a last question, and then we're going to move on to some viewer questions. So finally, as a marketeer, what do you think you've learned the most as a learning during this particular time that is a takeaway for you that you can inform some of our viewers about that's just, you've learned?
I spoke with a professor of mine before COVID started, and I have a very vivid memory of where we were sitting having this conversation. And he said to me, I see my students come back and they want to show me these shiny presentations with all of this, data-rich information, these dashboards, and I just look at them and say, well, what about the basics?
Right.
What about reaching the actual customer? And so that always sat with me. And then as we've been going through this time, when you feel like you could get spun on your head, and I said this before, now more than ever, it really is about good marketing basics. You can have so many shiny objects, and you can spend a whole lot of money and time and energy experimenting. But the bottom line is, if you know who you're talking to, if you've got it aligned with the outcomes that you're looking for, and you have a North Star because you've got a brand that you're working for that you believe in and you believe in their purpose, those are kind of the keys to success. And that's really just good marketing basics. So maybe what I've doubled down on is don't forget the basics.
That's a great answer. Love it. Okay, we're going to move to some questions. So we've got a few here. Here we go. What is top of mind as you prepare for the back half of 2020?
Such a great question. The top of mind is, I think, probably not sounding tone deaf. I think we spend a lot of time thinking about pandemic. I think we cannot forget that we also have to be thinking about social equity, justice, inclusion, and understanding that all of this, all of this in aggregate is us really trying to push ourselves to just be better humans. So I think that's truly top of mind.
Yeah, right. Next question. How are you determining where to spend time on emerging technologies?
I think that's leaning into it's leaning into the data that you're actually able to pull. So I think you really have to look at what is your scorecard, and what does it really mean to you? Is it showing you that you do need to move into emerging platforms, or is it showing that you need to double down in other places? I think that's where you become really reliant on ensuring that you have that you do have a strategy for that investment of both time and resources.
What's this one? How has your leadership style changed over the past few months? Have you been able to develop more personal relationships with your colleagues and partners?
Such a good question. I would say I thrive on relationships in general. Probably my least favorite part of this is that there's that physicality of being with people, traveling to go see teams that aren't where I am. Has been my own personal challenge. And so it's funny, I was on a call this morning about reimagining the future of work. Imagine that. And we all spoke about how we're not, that we're now living at work, literally. And so because those relationships are so important to me, I have to figure out when I have to shut off, because I want to just keep talking to people, because you want to keep engaging. You don't want to miss that opportunity during the day. So there's that. But I would say overall, my leadership strategy has probably hasn't changed that much. It's just trying to do more in a very complicated time.
That's right. And then the last question, in terms of marketing and marketing spend for a company like yours, when planning a marketing budget for 2021, normally marketing budgets go up a percentage. Do you think during this time, most companies are realizing they can spend less to get more? What is your philosophy?
That's a great, well, you already answered the question. Whoever asked it already answered the question. No, I think we're all going to be challenged to stay flat or or decrease, often decrease your budget and do more. And so it's really, you often, I remember I was one time, if you have $1, where are you going to spend it? I think about that dollar often. And so I think it's being much smarter about where you're using your dollars, what you're investing in, what you're asking your teams to do. Are you getting the most out of them? I think everybody's learning in this moment. So it may be that there are people on your team who you can invest more time in to get more talent out of. So opportunities all around.
And then one more question, which is like post-pandemic, do you feel that you will move back to your traditional marketing strategies, or will you be adapting and amplifying new strategies you found successful during the pandemic?
1000% adapting.
Adapting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Gensler recently produced a work from home survey. What were the most interesting insights and any surprises?
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you to who asked that question. So that was the 12% data point that I referenced before, that only 12% of the workforce wants to stay at home. We're actually issuing a second round of that work from home survey, because if you think about it, I think that was released in April, and think about how much has changed since then. And so what I'm really interested to see is the delta on any of those questions and what has changed, because I think there's so many things that we have to realize. Like a couple weeks into COVID, we may still have liked our children, and we probably don't like them anymore. And so that's going to change your answers.
Exactly.
So things like that.
Exactly. Well, that's it. We seem to be out of the questions and out of time. I see Emily's just popped up there, so I don't want to run
There's
over.
our hook. Yeah.
Leslie,
Thank you.
thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, I definitely am not in the 12% that wants to stay home. So eager to get back in the office place. But thank you both for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, we're headed into our last session of the day, everyone. So we are thrilled to be joined by TJ McCormick, the Vice President and Head of Global Creative for CBRE, the largest commercial real estate company in the world. TJ is a member of CBRE's executive marketing team with creative oversight of the internal design team and partner agencies. He's responsible for developing CBRE's overall strategy, brand messaging, and design aesthetics across all touchpoints. And today's session will be moderated by Brian Kavanaugh, Director of North American Field and Global Customer Marketing at Bynder. Welcome to the stage, TJ and Brian.
Thanks so much, Emily.
All right, I'll let you guys kick it off.
Awesome. Well, hello again, TJ, and thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for joining. I say we jump into the conversation pretty soon, which of course always just needs to start with a couple introductions. So I'll just go ahead and intro myself real quick, and then TJ, you can kind of do the same, following up on what Emily had kind of previewed just there. So as mentioned, my name is Brian Kavanaugh. I'm the Director of Marketing here for Bynder in the US, as well as some global customer marketing functions. And for those that aren't familiar, Bynder is a digital asset management platform, cloud-based, primarily designed for brand managers, creative directors, comms directors to create, manage, and distribute their content out to all its endpoints, which is typically a lot of different marketers, as well as sales partners and all the channels where digital assets flow, which is uber relevant to our discussion today, both with who we have here in TJ and with his brand, as well as some of the trends we see today, especially in light of everyone having to work remotely, all of sales and marketing having to take place digitally for the time being, and a few other trends that we'll dive into. So TJ, if you want to just introduce yourself a little bit more, as well as your team and your company, we can get started.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brian, and thanks for having me on. So as was mentioned, I'm TJ McCormick, the VP of Global Creative at CBRE. And for those of you who don't know, CBRE is the world's largest commercial real estate services and investment firm. We've got over 100,000 employees. offices all over the world, and I'm based in the New York office, or was up until a few months ago. So my role is primarily focused on global brand design and creative. And my team, which is comprised of mostly designers, are responsible for developing and expanding our creative platform and implementing it across a variety of touch points related to the business. So that platform is really centered around four things. So it's brand identity, both visual and verbal, brand experience. So that's things like events, digital experiences, and content. And then operational excellence, which is really teams and tools. We also have a team of designers that are almost exclusively focused on business development. And then another set of designers that work on property marketing. Those teams are not part of my team, but officially, but their work is very much impacted and informed by what we're doing at the global brand level.
Cool. And,
Go ahead.
no, so I was just gonna say, we're talking today first and foremost about creative and content marketing. So, I'm curious to get a better understanding of, your team, your brand, your objectives. What are the main types of content that you're creating, and what is the audience for that?
Yeah, so I think if you think about the word content, right, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and certainly to a lot of different brands. For us, given the nature of our industry and the fact that we're a B2B company, most of the content that we're creating is really around industry and research reports. So a lot of thought leadership materials across a variety of sectors related to the business. It's very data driven, very data centric. And it's mostly intended for current clients and prospects. The intent, obviously, is to help them navigate through their needs and the needs of their employees as it relates to their real estate space and portfolios. Peripherally, it's also intended to help our sales professionals and help them with conversations they're having with potential clients and giving them useful and timely information at the point of sale. So those reports and those thought leadership documents can take different forms depending on the audience and the content. More often than not, it's like a simple PDF download. Sometimes we'll build out a slightly more comprehensive digital activation of the report or the content, which would include like infographics and video, but it really depends on who the audience is. So if the audience is a bit broader, we'll treat it differently and try to do a bit more with it because it has slightly more mass appeal.
Yep. And just out of curiosity, is it entirely for the consumption of your customers, or is there also an element of maybe some media takes your proprietary data and might quote it or backlink or kind of build brand awareness that way?
Yeah, that's a good point. So there is a PR component to it. Again, I think how much of a factor that plays in really has to do with the actual content. That's
Yep.
part of the story. But you're right, that is definitely a component to it.
For sure. And you mentioned you were working in the New York office until everything kind of went down. And CBRE being in real estate, that's a brand and a company that's front and center to the impacts of COVID-19 and remote work, amongst other things. So I'm curious your take on what your team is doing to adapt, what the kind of brand message is that you're leading with, and where's the journey taken you since the middle of March?
Well, me personally, it's taken me to New Jersey. But
okay. Next question.
I think like everyone, we've definitely had to pivot. I mean, I think certainly in commercial real estate, given the impact that this has had on offices, retail, hotels, and a variety of other sort of physical spaces. That said, I think adapting is not unique to us. I think every brand and every industry is having to do some form of pivoting and changing. So it's not unique to us, I guess is my point.
Sure.
But most of what we've been doing has been more focused on helping our clients. So really trying to be more of a consultative partner for them throughout this time, because there's so much is unknown and there's just a lot of the information seemingly changing every day. Sometimes it's in direct conflict from what you might have heard the previous day. So we're doing a lot of work in support of that effort. It's really similar to what Jamie just mentioned in the previous segment, where it's more about letting our clients know that we're here to help and support them more than anything. It's not necessarily like about creating content that's like a really hard sell. It's just an effort to show that we're here to support them through these difficult times. and then the other thing I'd say that we've we've definitely experienced is really has more to do with the immediacy and the speed with which we need to get information out. There's a tremendous amount of, and it kind of goes back to the idea that information is changing so frequently and so quickly that
Sure.
when we have information and new insights, we want to get it out as quickly as possible. So that's been a big change. And then we've also changed a lot in terms of how we actually deliver the content. As I mentioned, we do a ton of reports, and more often than not, those reports take the form of a PDF or just a straight download. So what we try to do is create new forms of content for us, not necessarily new for the world, obviously, but new for us, and in ways that are more timely and more relevant. So we created a podcast probably 7 days into this all happening back in March called The Weekly Take. And that's really about conversations and our view on commercial real estate and the world at large. So it features researchers and economists from CBRE, plus a variety of guests that we bring in depending on the topic. And again, the idea is like, let's create relevant and timely content for clients so that they can help sort of navigate what's happening. And it also positions us as a leader in the market. So over the past 5-6 months, we've done episodes on everything from reinventing flexible office space to reopening hotels and restaurants. How has the construction industry been impacted by all this? And then my personal favorite episode, the necessity of cold storage and food storage during COVID, which is of particular relevance for my household and I'm sure many others. So it's been really interesting. And again, all of this is in service of creating more engaging and purposeful content for our clients. And the other thing I'd say too is that I think our initial approach to when this all happened was that we were creating a lot of content that was in direct response to what was happening in the market. And over time, that's shifted a bit. So it sort of shifted from an immediate response and reaction to then we started talking about, okay, well, what do we need to do to get people safely back into offices, and what does that look like?
Yep.
And more recently, we've shifted even further and said, okay, well, let's actually start to think about more future-focused things. How will things look and how will things operate in a post-COVID world? So, for example, what will the role of offices be in the future of work?
Sure.
How will COVID change the way that offices are designed and how that space is used? So these are all questions that are like very much on top of our minds, and I suspect our clients' minds, and probably even people who are outside of the commercial real estate industry. So that's been really interesting, and I think a welcome sort of shift away from things that are so focused on COVID.
Sure. I'm curious about the podcast because I can bet that every content producer out there either currently is creating one or has thought about it. And so, what has it kind of taught you and your team, or any, takeaways just in the early going here of your podcast?
Great question. I think the biggest thing that we learned is that you don't just make one podcast and then you're done.
Right.
Yeah. It's an ongoing thing, and you have to really think through who the guests will be. What is what's the topic going to be every week? We're doing it every week, so obviously that makes it a bit more challenging. And then I think you really have to invest in promoting it and making sure that you're getting people engaging with it and listening to it and subscribing to it. And so I think we learned a lot pretty quickly, but it's been really successful. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from brokers and from clients.
That's great. Did you have to hire and or like bring on more resources, or just kind of shift some resources that were already there?
Mostly it's being done with internal resources. We have a partner that handles the most of the production and the recording.
Cool.
But everything else is done internally.
Nice. And so that was actually something else I was wondering just more broadly was, how you set up your team, and in sort of your ways of working. And you mentioned the 4 kind of pillars that you support. If you can just talk a little bit about that, and then specifically, I guess, how has that been impacted by working remotely as opposed to, the kind of having the whiteboard and the big screens and everything to work with?
Yeah, I missed that. It's been challenging. And I know that applies to everyone. Working remotely has its benefits. I mean, I'm certainly enjoying not having to commute into Manhattan every day.
Sure.
But it's hard, I think if you have kids who are home doing remote learning, if you have a spouse or a partner that's also working remotely, everyone is like trying to get online, and so there's not a ton of bandwidth. So
Yeah.
it's hard. But we've been really fortunate. We have a great team, and everyone has been really flexible and done a tremendous job of adapting and working through it. I think more than any other type of work, designers and creative people need that that interaction in person and in the same
100%.
room.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for putting work up on the wall, walking around, marking it up, and having everyone talk through it. I miss that, and I'm sure a lot of people do. So in effort to try to offset that lack of collaboration, we've been doing a lot more cross-functional design team Zoom meetings. As I said earlier, we have a lot of designers at the company, but sadly, right now, everyone's a little bit too siloed. Nobody's really talking to each other enough. We're not sharing work enough. We're not really sharing best practices across each group. I think we do a pretty good job of that individually, but not broadly or globally. So what we're trying to do now is to try to bring people together through these calls so that they can share work, they can inspire each other. Just so people can feel more connected and more supported. I think communication is super important right now. It's very easy for people to feel isolated or stuck creatively because they're on their own. So we really try to encourage people to be open and honest about their workload and their life load, and just making sure that they know that there's other people around the company that are here and available to support them through it.
Interesting. Super important. We're doing a little bit of the same in our company, cross-functionally, especially those who are creating content who can sometimes feel siloed anyway, just based on perhaps their role.
Yep.
Yeah. And so what I was wondering too, again, with team setup, but more about like the team that builds the brand. CBRE is a global brand. It strikes me as both global and local in the sense of it has a physical presence in a lot of different, geographic areas, but it is a global brand. So, the content that you create and the brand you guys are, portraying, to what extent is it global versus local in terms of your team setup and the content you're bringing to market?
Yeah. So in terms of my team and the work that we're bringing together, my team is very much focused almost exclusively on global level work. Now, they also have to ensure that any global trend report or any work that we're doing at that level can be executed and activated locally. So what that ends up meaning is that my team ends up having to create toolkits, for lack of a better term, or assets that address the global need, but also can be handed off to local marketers, and then they can make it relevant to their local markets and sales professionals at that location. So a lot of it is very much global in nature, but we have a lot of local marketers throughout the world, and so each of those teams can take work that we're creating at the global level and make it, again, apply it and make it relevant for their needs. So we don't necessarily get down into the weeds of what's happening at the local level. It'd be too much. The scale is just not realistic and not feasible. So we try to stay a little higher level, and again, provide tools and resources that people can use at the local level to help support their needs.
Yep.
But in terms of how the team operates, again, like we have a team in the US, we have a team in APAC and EMEA, and they're all creating global level work that's shared locally.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, we see a number of our, customers, like I said at the beginning, our customers are brand teams, creative teams that are trying to strike that balance, because there's oftentimes a sort of cultural shift within the organization to really feel like it's one brand, it's global. If you see the brand touch point in any of its key markets, it should feel consistent. But at the same time, there are cultural nuances, sometimes legal nuances with how you can advertise. So there needs to be like a kind of a local filter that everything is put through. And getting that right is no small feat, because you can't hire, an army of graphic designers, creative directors, and
I wish we could.
managers. Well, yeah, right. You can't, but you can't for every single key market. So that's an interesting trend. Especially as all kind of touch points go global, go digital, based on the world we live in right now.
I think for us, it's also about setting up. This mindset applies to content, obviously, but it also applies to broader sort of creative design things. And that is about setting up a simple framework that is scalable in all the ways that it needs to be scalable, and that it can flex and contract in the ways and places that it needs to. So if we have a system that works in that way, I think it makes the work more successful, and it makes it more relevant too. Like to your point, like at the local level, people can take it and make it appropriate for their needs, but without like ruining or impacting consistency
Right.
at the global level.
Yeah. I had a conversation with an art director at a tech startup, so very much like different than, you know, kind of the size and scope of your business, but she was saying, you know, her worry is that the brand won't scale when they bring on like 5 designers as opposed to their current 1. So it's like it seems like there's that worry, regardless of the size of the company, that as you scale efforts as well as headcount, some of the magic could get lost.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work as it relates to, we call it governance here. Just ensuring that all of the communications that are going out, whether it's email or anything else, is on brand, and it's on brand. B, it's checking all the legal boxes it needs to check. So it's for a company of our size and scale, it's a huge. I actually didn't realize how significant it is. It's a really big deal for sure.
And just out of curiosity, is, you know, commercial real estate fairly regulated in terms of what you can and cannot say, or in terms of like, you know, communication styles and things like that?
I mean, it's certainly not regulated as much as the airline industry, which is where I was before.
Okay.
I think, I don't know that it's necessarily regulated from a legal perspective. I think we have our own internal requirements that obviously have some legal implications, but I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a heavily regulated industry, at least from what I've seen. Again, I'm 7 months into the job, so I could be. Hopefully, I won't get slapped on the wrist for saying that.
Well, we'll see if you make it to month 8. Yeah, so I just had a couple more questions that I was, you know, wondering, and one is kind of a general one. I'm, you know, curious if you had to be a, you know, Nostradamus of the creative and branding world, or a kind of prognosticator for next year. You know, where do you think the broader creative function, trends in branding, how big brands such as CBRE go to market? You know, what are you kind of seeing from your perspective?
That's a great question. I think it was mentioned in the previous segment about adapting. I think that's going to be a huge trend, and it's going to be not a trend, it's going to be a requirement. I just think there's so much unknown with what's going to happen that I think you have to be flexible and willing to change and be nimble enough to change, which for us is not always easy given our scale. So for me, I think it's about just being adaptive and being open to rolling with what's happening in the market and in the world. I think you don't really have a choice. But one of the other things that we look at, or we're looking at into next year, and certainly the end of this year, is how do we try to do more with less? Yeah. And so, you know, everybody's kind of has budget concerns for next year, and so, you know, one of the things that we look at all the time is, are there other tech tools that we can use that afford us the opportunity to do more work, do it at the scale and the consistency of quality that we want. So we're always looking at that. And if you think about it, it's really one of the few ways you can actually get more work done consistently with fewer people, sadly. And then the other thing I think that is of particular importance to us, again, is taking a bit of a mental mind shift in terms of thinking about how we work. So can we do more with less? And I don't mean do more with less people or less time. I mean more so, how can we do more with less content, right? So if we're creating historically maybe 5 to 7 reports over the course of a month, what would it look like if we scaled that back and only did 1 or 2, but really went deep on the content and really looked at how we're presenting it? Can we create more engaging graphics? Can we make a more immersive digital experience? Like, what else can we do with that content to make it feel more significant, more substantial, and more relevant and more intentional, rather than just cranking out like templated content over and over again? So that's a big one for us going forward.
Absolutely. And sometimes I like to ask predictions for 2021. So I think we just heard it. You're going to do more with less.
That is, we're going to attempt to do more with less.
Right, yes. Right. And so I was wondering, you know, I'm, kind of a marketing director at a much smaller company, but we have some of the same challenges, and all of our business is via, direct, I shouldn't say all, but it's all via direct sales, meaning there has to be someone drawing up an agreement, and, the prospect needs to know our content and be familiar with it. Sometimes we even wonder, how much is sales using our content, how much of our website, is the prospect engaging with, which we can determine, to a decent degree. But I'm wondering, attribution and knowing what works, does your team kind of experience that as well? Or how do you answer that question?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
So you said the content is for customers. And so do you attribute success of content in them saying we used it a lot? Are there other metrics? Are there other touch points that your customers need to use it in order to consider one piece of content a success versus another one maybe needing improvement?
Yeah, no, I think that's a big one. We haven't historically done a great job of getting that kind of like feedback after the fact, which is something we're focused on going forward.
I guess that was the question. Yeah, like how do you sort of get that feedback?
Yeah, that's something that we're working on. I have a colleague who's very much focused on that going into next year, because again, I think historically we haven't done a particularly great job of having access to that data and those insights. I think a part of it is historically it's been a little bit more anecdotal in terms of how we're getting that feedback and hearing how people are responding to it and whether or not it's been effective. A lot of that also comes from people on the ground at the local level. So we'll hear from brokers whether or not a certain thing was effective, or they liked it, or they want more of something else. And so that often also helps drive where the content is coming from and what the forms that it's taking.
Yep. Okay, I'm just looking at if there are any other questions. I think that may have been it. I mean, I'm always also just curious, how you enable teams. So for instance, does the social team always have what they need? Does the partner enablement, the biz dev always have what they need? Is it, something you consider ongoing and fluid, or are there set protocols in place there in terms of teams grabbing the content they need?
Yeah, no, it's very much a fluid, ongoing process. In fact, my role is pretty new at the company, as I was mentioning, my counterpart, that role is also new. So the idea that we have someone who's focused on content paired with creative is a new thing for the company. So it's very much an evolving process. We're learning a lot as we go through this. We're learning what works, what doesn't work. We're learning, what are the most efficient and effective ways of making a piece of content and then distributing it and all the ways that it needs to be distributed. So it's very much an iterative process. I don't know that we've necessarily solved it, and I think we're going to continue to iterate on it. And so so far it's been good, and I think again going into the future there's going to be a lot more opportunity to look at what that looks like. So it's been good so far. Yeah.
And another question actually that I see on the list here is more about kind of consumption habits. So it says, working from home during quarantine has changed a lot of digital habits. What are you seeing when it comes to behavioral changes in terms of consumption of content and or engaging with the brand?
I think we've seen that people have more time to consume content, so that's a good thing. I think one of the things that we've noticed is that the time of day with which people are consuming content, that's evolved a little bit, because I think maybe historically you'd have people engaging more frequently during like commute time. That's obviously changed.
Sure.
But we have seen increased levels of consumption in general, and we're seeing more engagement with a variety of pages on our website. Most specifically, the pages on the site that are addressing content related to COVID and all those things I mentioned earlier in terms of reopening offices. So all of that is getting a lot of traction, a lot of engagement, probably higher than it has been for us in years past. Again, probably I think for a couple of reasons. One, people have time, and two, people are looking for information as it relates to all that stuff because no one quite knows what's going to happen. And so if we can be a source of useful information and guidance, then that's great.
Absolutely. Especially in your segment and industry, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, there's Emily.
Hey guys. Thank you so much for such a great session. Loved hearing all things, global creative and hearing about how you all are using your platform and website to kind of help educate consumers in this time period where we're all looking for, some reassuring information. So thank you both for joining us today. It was great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks so much. Thanks, TJ.
Hope to have you again soon. And thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining us today. We appreciate everyone, speaking on content and creative marketing. And I know that I personally took so much from all of the sessions. So we'll hope that you all join us again for our next Brand Innovators Livecast, which will be Wednesday, September 9th at 2 p.m. for a session on the future of TV and digital video. We'll be joined by marketing leaders from Coca-Cola, Intel, Paramount Pictures, Wells Fargo, and more. We hope everyone has a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.